Our next speaker is Bill MacDonnell, who is not from Ottawa. He used to be from Calgary, but now he can claim to be from Kingston. I've known Bill probably almost as long as I've been at the War Museum, because I first saw his work in connection with the tour he did with the PPCLI in Croatia, and we showed that collection of work at the old War Museum on Sussex Drive. So Bill can claim to be a CFAP artist, and I think that's one acronym that hasn't been mentioned today, but CFAP was the predecessor for CFAP, the Canadian Armed Forces Civilian Artist Program. Bill has also been a CFAP artist in Afghanistan and has produced a fairly significant body of work dealing with events around the world of military significance. So in a way he's a full-time military artist and has been really for the last decade or so, but he might argue with that, but that's my experience to date.
Thanks, Laura. I think I want to deny some of that. Just that I think I've always, at these talks, I'm feeling a bit of a fraud because I've never really considered myself a military artist or a war artist. My interest, perhaps because I grew up in the military, where I was very comfortable with that situation, and even was with signals during my college years. But what it did for me was really excite my interest in history. Not to become a historian, but just to kind of really want to know why the world I was living in was the way it was, and especially the history of the 20th century. I often fixated on not so much people as places. And so in some ways I think it'd be much easier to refer to myself as a landscape artist. And I was particularly interested in those banal landscapes where there was perhaps nothing in particularly beautiful to look at, but something, usually something horrible, being the 20th century, had happened. So I'm going to mix sort of some of the work I did for the military with just some of my other work. And you'll notice there probably is a significant difference. With the work I was doing on my own, there's usually a lot of angels flying around, or angels, the names of a group of angels called the Gregori, who were supposedly a group of fallen angels. They were out of favor in heaven because they rather liked humans, and came down and taught humans a lot of bad habits, the weapons of war, the arts of war, cosmetics, writing, all of those bad things. And so they became important to me as sort of metaphors. And the other thing is you'll see the pictures are a lot more loosely painted. There's a lot of dripping and so on. And again, there's usually a reason for this, or the sky is painted a pink, very artificial color for metaphoric reasons rather than because that's the way it was. So I'll start, this is the kind of picture I'm doing alternately with some of the work from Kandahar or from Afghanistan right now. It does deal with history. The boat in the foreground is in fact an outline of the cruiser Aurora, and the ship that set off the Russian Revolution fired the first shot. And I was always fascinated by this, and I've done somewhere in the region of 50 to 60 paintings about that ship. Other work has more of a landscape feeling, but I wasn't thinking of it so much as a military picture as it was a historic one, although the military certainly has something to do with it. This is General de Castries' bunker at Dien Bien Phu. After the Second World War, when the Vietnamese wished to take their country back and not remain a French colony, the first part of the Vietnam War broke out. It virtually ended on this spot with Viet Minh soldiers standing on the roof of this building. It's not very often visited. It's still there and is kept by Dien Bien Phu in roughly this shape, although the trees on the left are a little higher now. But again, there's probably buried in the grass and so on, lots of names of political philosophers and things like this to try and set some sort of historic tone. Another project I had was to photograph largely buildings, but other things which became ruins in the 20th century. And about half my work probably involved with that. Here on the left is a church in Croatia. On the right, a ruined church in North Vietnam. And both of them have particular significance, as they were churches not wanted by the opposing side, and often representing a degree of power in that land. And so they were natural targets. Not necessarily victims in this case. In August of '94, out of the blue, I saw a note on my college door saying if I knew anybody who would like to go to Croatia and work as a war artist, please call this number. And I called. It was answered by Colonel Bill Buick, who was a retiring member of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry and an amateur artist. And he hired me, or invited me to go with him to Croatia and do whatever we did. We even took a student along, and it was quite an experience. This is sort of our entry into the area called the Krajina, which was reputed to be the area where it's a Serbian enclave, where supposedly the toughest Serbs in all of the Balkans lived. And this was the area in dispute, because as you saw on the map, it was part of Croatia. We stopped the vehicle just because this view was so astounding. It felt sort of biblical. It was full of rocks and small shrubs. And the first thing I heard was that I was being shouted at to get off the side of the road that could be mined. So that's the first rule I learned. The second thing was that truck coming at us is full of soldiers. Put away your cameras or they'll shoot you. That was the second rule. Was cameras are considered spy material, and people take a great deal of umbrage at seeing them. So we hid our cameras and waved gently as they went by.